Beloved, let me start here. Because before we talk about who hurt you, who doubted you, who walked away, or who misunderstood you, we need to talk about the sacred season you are standing in right now. There are moments when God does not announce his next move with noise. There are seasons when heaven is not loud, not flashy, not dramatic, but intentional. And 2026 is not calling you to explain yourself, prove yourself, or defend yourself. It is calling you to focus. It is calling you to become so rooted in who God is shaping you to be that distraction loses its voice. Some of you have been praying for answers, and God says the answer is not outside of you. It is in the discipline to stay silent long enough to hear him clearly. You have been exhausted trying to correct narratives, manage perceptions, and keep everyone comfortable while your own soul has been starving. But there is a divine invitation being released over your life. Stop reacting, start refining. Stop announcing, start aligning. This is not the year to clap back. This is the year to come back to yourself. Because what God is doing in you does not need commentary. It needs commitment. Silence is not weakness when God is your defender. Focus is not selfish when God is your source. And if you will dare to sit with yourself, tend to yourself, heal what you keep hiding, and grow what you keep postponing, you will discover that staying silent is not about disappearing. It is about preparing. Let me tell you why focusing on yourself is not rebellion. It is responsibility. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that being available to everyone was the same as being valuable. So you stretched yourself thin, poured yourself out, showed up even when you were empty, and called it love. But what you were really doing was abandoning yourself in the name of being needed. And God is saying, I cannot build you while you are busy rescuing everyone else. I cannot restore you while you are constantly redirecting your energy outward. There is a difference between compassion and codependency, and many of you have confused the two. You keep trying to heal wounds you did not cause, manage emotions that are not yours, and carry responsibilities God never assigned to you. Focusing on yourself is not about ignoring others. It is about honoring the assignment God gave you, which is your life, your calling, your healing, your obedience. Because here's the truth nobody clapped for when you needed it. You cannot save people by sacrificing yourself. You cannot keep burning and call it purpose. You cannot keep bleeding and call it ministry. God never asked you to be the hero of everyone's story. He asked you to be a steward of your own soul. And some of you are tired, not because life is hard, but because you are everywhere except where you are supposed to be. Your focus has been scattered, divided, diluted. You wake up thinking about what they said, how they feel, what they expect, and by the time you get to God, you have nothing left to give. So God says in 2026, I want you to come home to yourself. Sit with your thoughts, face your patterns, confront your fears, heal your triggers, build your discipline, strengthen your faith. Because the version of you that keeps trying to fix everyone else is the same version that keeps postponing their own breakthrough. And let's talk about silence, because silence makes people uncomfortable, especially people who benefited from your explanations. When you stop explaining yourself, those who were committed to misunderstanding you get nervous. When you stop announcing your moves, those who were monitoring you lose access. When you stop reacting, those who were provoking you lose power. Silence is not passive, it is strategic. Jesus was silent before Pilate, not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew who he was. And when you are secure in who God called you to be, you don't need to narrate your process. You don't need to justify your growth. You don't need to convince anyone that you are changing. Let the fruit speak. Let the peace speak. Let the consistency speak. Some of you keep sabotaging your own growth because you talk too much, you announce things too early, you share dreams with people who don't have the capacity to carry them. You look for validation in rooms God never invited you into, and then you wonder why you feel discouraged, delayed, and drained. Silence is not about secrecy, it is about stewardship. There are things God is developing in you that are still fragile, still forming, still tender, and not everyone deserves access to your becoming. A seed does not grow faster because you dig it up to check on it. It grows because it stays buried long enough to take root. In 2026, God is asking you to stay buried in Him, hidden in discipline, grounded in truth, so that when you rise, you are not just visible, you are unshakable. Focusing on yourself also means being honest about what you need to unlearn. Some of you learned survival, not health. You learned how to adapt, not how to rest. You learned how to please, not how to prioritize. And God says you cannot carry old mindsets into new seasons. If you don't pause to rewire your thinking, you will keep recreating the same cycles with different faces. So focusing on yourself means therapy without shame, prayer without performance, boundaries without apology. It means saying no without explaining, resting without guilt, and choosing peace over proving a point. It means letting people be disappointed so you don't keep being depleted. And let me be clear, when you focus on yourself, people will accuse you of changing. Let them. Growth always looks like betrayal to people who were comfortable with the old version of you. They liked you accessible, available, exhausted. They liked you when you overgave and underasked. But this version of you is learning discernment. This version of you is choosing alignment over approval. This version of you understands that being quiet does not mean being weak. It means being wise. You don't need to respond to every comment. You don't need to correct every lie. You don't need to defend every decision. God is your vindicator and time is your witness. Focusing on yourself is also spiritual warfare. Because the enemy would love nothing more than for you to stay distracted, offended, reactive, and loud while never actually becoming whole. If he can keep you busy managing chaos, you'll never build capacity. If he can keep you talking, you'll never listen. But when you focus, when you get still, when you discipline your mind and guard your mouth, clarity comes, strength comes, direction comes, and suddenly things that used to trigger you don't move you the same way. Situations that used to derail you don't have the same power because you are no longer looking outward for permission to be who God already approved. This is the year you stop trying to be understood and start being obedient. The year you stop performing healing and start living healed. The year you stop explaining why you changed and start honoring why you had to. Focus on yourself means you finally believe that you are worth the work, worth the patience, worth the process, worth the silence. And when you get this right, when you truly commit to tending your own soul, you will notice that God starts answering prayers you stopped praying out loud. Doors start opening without announcements. And peace settles in places that used to be noisy because silence has made room for transformation to happen quietly, deeply, relentlessly. And as you focus on yourself, you will begin to notice how much of your energy has been leaking through unnecessary access. Access to your emotions, access to your reactions, access to your time. You gave people backstage passes to your soul who never bought a ticket to support your healing. And God is saying, close the doors you keep running back to open. Not because you are bitter, but because you are becoming intense. You cannot keep inviting interruption into a season that requires isolation. Even Jesus withdrew often, not because he lacked love, but because he understood rhythm. He understood that power flows from intimacy with God, not from constant availability to people. Some of you are afraid of focusing on yourself because you don't like what comes up when it gets quiet. Silence exposes wounds you've been avoiding, patterns you've been excusing, habits you've been spiritualizing. When the noise dies down, you can hear the insecurity, the fear, the disappointment you buried under busyness. But healing does not happen in distraction. Healing happens when you sit long enough to feel, to grieve, to forgive, to release. God is not intimidated by what you discover about yourself. He has been waiting for you to stop running from it. And the silence you fear is the same space God wants to use to rebuild you. Focusing on yourself means you stop negotiating with what God already told you to leave. You stop asking for confirmation when obedience is clear. You stop revisiting places God already closed. Because every time you go back, you delay what's ahead. You keep checking on people who were only meant to be a chapter, not the conclusion. And God says, if you keep rereading the same page, you will never finish the book. Your future needs your attention more than your past needs your explanation. And in this silence, you will begin to discern who is assigned to your next level and who was only equipped for your last one. Not everyone who walked with you can walk where you're going. Not everyone who supported you then can celebrate you now. And that does not make them evil. It makes them seasonal. But if you keep talking, explaining, trying to carry them with you, you will slow down what God is accelerating. Silence helps you detach without drama. Focus helps you move without guilt. There is a maturity that comes when you realize you don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to justify your growth. You don't need to warn people before you change. The loudest statement you can make is consistency, showing up differently, choosing peace repeatedly, declining invitations that cost you your progress, protecting your mornings, guarding your nights, feeding your spirit before feeding your ego. This is the kind of focus that changes everything quietly. And let me say this clearly, you are not behind, you are not late, you are not running out of time, you were being prepared. God had to strip distractions, expose dependencies, and break habits before he could trust you with what you asked for. Because if he gave it to you before you learned to focus, you would have lost it trying to please people who were never part of the promise. So 2026 is not about speed. It is about precision, not about noise, about depth, not about being seen, about being solid. When you focus on yourself, you stop needing applause to feel affirmed. You stop craving validation to feel valuable. You stop chasing attention to feel alive because you finally know who you are when nobody is watching. And that version of you, the disciplined one, the quiet one, the healed one, is dangerous to anything that once had power over you. Distractions fall off. Temptations lose appeal. Opinions lose weight because you are no longer empty inside. And silence teaches you restraint. It teaches you not everything deserves a response. Not every battle is yours. Not every invitation is aligned. Some of you have been fighting battles God never asked you to engage in, arguing with people he already removed, explaining yourself to people who don't even like themselves. And God says, save your voice for prayer. Save your energy for growth. Save your emotions for people who can steward them well. Focusing on yourself also means you stop outsourcing responsibility for your happiness. You stop waiting for closure, apologies, recognition. You stop pausing your life until someone else changes because closure is a decision, not a conversation. Freedom is a choice, not a permission slip, and silence helps you take your power back. When you stop explaining, you stop bleeding. When you stop reacting, you stop reopening wounds. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. And the more you focus, the more you will realize how much God has been speaking all along. He was speaking in the discomfort, speaking in the delays, speaking in the endings, but you were too busy asking people what they thought to hear what he said. Silence sharpens your discernment, focus aligns your steps, and suddenly you're not confused anymore. You're clear, calm, grounded, unbothered in ways you never thought possible. This is not the year you prove them wrong. This is the year you prove God right, not with arguments, but with obedience. Not with announcements, but with alignment. Not with noise, but with consistency. You don't need to tell anyone what you're doing. You don't need to post every win. You don't need to share every plan. Some victories are too sacred to be exposed too early. Some transformations need privacy to survive. And as you continue to focus on yourself, you will notice something shift. Your reactions slow down. Your patience grows. Your standards rise. You stop tolerating what drains you. You stop entertaining what distracts you. You stop revisiting what God already healed. And without saying a word, your life begins to speak for itself. Beloved, silence is not empty, it is guarded. It is not absence, it is intention. There are things God is developing in you right now that cannot survive constant exposure. We live in a world that rewards noise, but heaven honors discretion. And in 2026, God is not asking you to speak louder. He is asking you to listen deeper. Because what he is forming in you requires protection, not promotion. You have mistaken visibility for validation, but some callings are destroyed by being seen too soon. Silence is not hiding, it is covering. It is God placing his hand over your life and saying, this is still forming, this is still sacred, this is still mine. Some of you have been talking your way out of your own breakthrough. You share before it's solid, you announce before it's stable, you explain before it's healed, and then you wonder why opposition rises so quickly. Why doubt creeps in, why discouragement shows up uninvited. It's because everything does not need an audience. Joseph's dreams were real, but sharing them prematurely cost him years. Not because the dream was wrong, but because the timing was off. Silence would have protected him from unnecessary warfare. And God is saying, learn from everything revealed is not meant to be repeated. Silence protects your peace. Peace is fragile when you are still learning how to keep it. Every argument you engage in steals from it. Every explanation you give weakens it. Every reaction drains it. You don't need to attend every fight you're invited to. You don't need to respond to every assumption. You don't need to correct every lie. Some things die when you stop feeding them your energy. Silence starves what seeks attention. And in that quiet, peace grows roots. Silence also protects your faith. Faith struggles in noisy environments. When too many voices are speaking, you start doubting what God already confirmed. Opinions begin to compete with revelation. Fear starts sounding like wisdom. And suddenly, you're confused, not because God stopped speaking, but because you never got quiet enough to hear him. When you stay silent, you reduce interference. You create space for God's voice to rise above the crowd. You stop polling people for answers God already gave you. There are battles you keep losing because you keep announcing your strategy. The enemy does not need access to what God is planning. Not everyone around you wants you healed, whole, disciplined, or focused. Some people benefit from your brokenness, your distraction, your availability. Silence shuts down access. It closes doors without slamming them. It creates distance without drama. It allows God to work without interfering. When Nehemiah rebuilt the wall, he didn't tell everyone what he was doing. He worked quietly, strategically, because focus required protection. Silence protects your growth. Growth is awkward before it is obvious. You will stumble, you will adjust, you will struggle, and if everyone is watching, you will feel pressure to perform instead of mature. Silence gives you room to fail privately and succeed authentically. It lets you develop without the pressure of expectations. It allows you to become instead of pretend. Because some of you have been acting healed instead of actually healing just to avoid questions, criticism, or confusion. God says, stop performing progress, protect the process. Silence also protects you from pride. When you talk less, you listen more. When you announce less, you depend more. When you hide in God, you remember who the source is. Public victories that are built in private silence carry humility. You know it wasn't you. You know how many tears, prayers, and lonely nights it took. And that kind of silence keeps you grounded when success comes. Because what is built quietly is sustained humbly. Some of you think silence means people win, that if you don't respond, they control the narrative. But let me free you. People will believe whatever their hearts are committed to believing, with or without your explanation. Silence does not hand them power, it hands you peace. You don't need to manage your reputation. God is better at that than you are. When you stay silent, God speaks through outcomes, through consistency, through fruit. And fruit is louder than words. Silence protects your emotional energy. Every conversation costs something. Every explanation pulls from your reserves, and you are not limitless. You were never meant to be. God designed you to steward your energy, not scatter it. When you stop oversharing, over-explaining, and overreacting, you conserve strength for what actually matters. You stop being drained by people who only come to take. You stop bleeding in rooms that don't know how to heal you. And silence protects your discernment. When you are quiet, you notice patterns you missed before. You see who only shows up when you're useful. You recognize who respects your boundaries and who resents them. You discern motives without confrontation. Silence becomes a filter. People reveal themselves when you stop filling the space with words. You learn who can handle your quiet and who needs your chaos to feel comfortable. God often does his deepest work in silence. He formed Adam before he presented him. He prepared David in fields before placing him on a throne. He matured Jesus for 30 years before releasing him publicly. Silence was not delay, it was development. And you keep asking God when, while he keeps asking you to be still long enough to be shaped, still long enough to be strengthened, still long enough to be trusted. In silence, your prayer life deepens. You stop performing spirituality and start living it. You pray without posting, you worship without witnesses, you obey without applause, and God meets you there in the unseen places, in the quiet decisions, in the discipline nobody claps for. And what he builds there cannot be shaken by opinions, delays, or distractions. Silence also protects you from regret. Some words cannot be taken back. Some reactions create damage that takes years to undo. When you pause, when you stay quiet, when you let God filter your response, you save yourself from unnecessary consequences. Silence gives wisdom time to arrive. It allows emotion to settle so truth can lead. This is not the year you explain your silence. This is the year you trust it. Trust that God is covering you. Trust that he is working. Trust that what is growing in you does not need validation to survive. Silence is not punishment. It is preservation. It is God saying, I am guarding this version of you until it is strong enough to stand without defense, without fear, without needing to be heard to know it matters. Beloved, there are seasons when God does not ask you to add more people to your life. He asks you to create space because growth is not crowded. Transformation needs room to breathe. And in 2026, God is teaching you that separation is not rejection. It is alignment. You have been trying to carry everyone with you into a place they were never equipped to enter. And every time you stop to explain why you need distance, you reopen doors God already closed. Separation does not require a speech, it requires obedience. Some of you feel guilty for outgrowing environments that once felt safe, but safety is not the same as suitability. What protected you in one season can limit you in the next. And God is not punishing you by separating you. He is positioning you. Elevation always requires distance. The higher you go, the fewer people can breathe in that atmosphere. It's not arrogance, it's reality. And when you keep trying to bring everyone with you, you dilute the assignment God gave you. You don't owe everyone access to your next level. You don't owe everyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't owe everyone a seat at your table. Some people were assigned to teach you, not to stay with you. And when you try to explain your growth to people who are committed to staying the same, all you do is invite resistance. Separation protects your focus. It removes unnecessary friction. It allows you to hear God without competing voices. There are people you keep revisiting out of loyalty, but loyalty to people should never come at the cost of obedience to God. You confuse history with destiny. You confuse familiarity with alignment. And God says, just because you survive together doesn't mean you are supposed to succeed together. Some relationships were built for survival mode, not purpose mode. And when God shifts you from surviving to becoming, separation becomes necessary. Separation also reveals truth. When you stop explaining, you see who respects your silence and who resents it. You see who supports your growth and who only supported your availability. Some people don't miss you, they miss what you did for them. And separation makes that clear without confrontation. You don't have to accuse, you don't have to defend. Distance does the talking. Let me say this gently. Everyone cannot handle the healed version of you. The healed you has boundaries. The healed you says no without guilt. The healed you no longer overfunctions to keep peace. And people who benefited from your brokenness will feel threatened by your wholeness. Separation is not cruelty. It is clarity. It helps you see who is assigned to your future and who was attached to your past. You keep explaining because you want to be understood, but not everyone wants to understand you. Some people want to control you, and explanations give control. When you stop explaining, you take your power back. You let people sit with their assumptions. You let God handle your reputation. You let time reveal truth. Separation without explanation teaches you that being misunderstood is not fatal. God often separates before he multiplies. He removed Lot before blessing Abraham. He isolated Moses before sending him back with authority. He pulled Jesus into the wilderness before releasing him into ministry. Separation was not delay, it was preparation. And you are frustrated because you think nothing is happening when in reality, everything is being rearranged. Separation requires courage because it feels lonely before it feels purposeful. There will be moments when you question if you did the right thing, moments when you miss what was familiar, moments when silence feels heavy. But loneliness is not the same as being alone. God often becomes loudest when people get quiet. And in that space, he clarifies your vision, sharpens your discernment, and strengthens your identity. When you stop explaining, you also stop negotiating. You stop giving people opportunities to talk you out of what God told you. You stop softening your convictions to keep connections. You stop shrinking to stay included. Separation allows you to stand fully in who you are becoming without compromise. This is not the year you chase understanding. This is the year you choose obedience. Understanding often comes later, sometimes never, but obedience always produces fruit. And when you finally arrive at the place God prepared for you, you will realize that the separation you resisted was the protection you needed. Beloved, healing does not rush, and it does not compete for attention. Healing requires stillness, honesty, and the courage to sit with what you have been distracting yourself from. Many of you have not avoided healing because you don't want it. You have avoided it because you don't want to feel what comes with it. So you stayed busy, you stayed connected, you stayed loud. You filled every quiet moment with noise so you wouldn't have to confront the ache you buried under productivity, relationships, and spiritual language. But God says healing cannot happen in chaos. Wholeness cannot grow in constant stimulation. There are wounds that only speak when everything else goes silent. Distraction has been your coping mechanism. You scroll so you don't think. You overwork so you don't feel. You overgive so you don't have to grieve. You stay surrounded so you don't have to sit alone with your thoughts. But healing demands presence. It asks you to be fully aware of where it hurts, why it hurts, and how long you've been carrying it. And until you remove the distractions, you will keep treating symptoms instead of addressing roots. God is not trying to expose you. He is trying to free you. Some of you keep asking God to heal what you refuse to face. You want peace, but you avoid silence. You want clarity, but you fear stillness. You want restoration, but you don't want to revisit the moment you broke. And God says, I heal what you allow me to touch. I restore what you bring into the light. Distraction keeps you busy, but it also keeps you bound. It numbs the pain without curing the wound. And numbness feels like relief until you realize you've also numbed your joy, your passion, your sensitivity to God's voice. Healing happens when you stop running from yourself. When you stop pretending you're okay because people expect you to be strong. When you stop spiritualizing avoidance and calling it faith. Faith is not denial. Faith is trusting God enough to sit in the uncomfortable places and believe He will meet you there. And He will, but only when you stop filling the space with noise. God often whispers healing, and whispers require quiet to be heard. Distraction also keeps old patterns alive. You repeat cycles not because you haven't learned, but because you haven't slowed down long enough to apply what you know. You keep attracting the same pain in different packaging. Different names, same outcome. And you wonder why it keeps happening. It's because healing requires interruption. You have to interrupt the habit of distraction, interrupt the urge to escape. Interrupt the instinct to avoid. When you pause, you begin to notice triggers. When you get quiet, you recognize patterns. When you remove distractions, you gain discernment. Some wounds cannot be healed in public. They need privacy. They need patience. They need time. And you keep reopening them by exposing them to opinions, advice, and judgment before they've had a chance to close. Everyone does not need to know your process. Everyone cannot speak into your pain. Healing is sacred work, and distraction cheapens it. God is calling you to protect your healing the same way you protect something valuable, by limiting access. And let's be honest, distraction also gives you excuses. As long as you're busy, you don't have to change. As long as you're distracted, you don't have to decide. As long as there's noise, you can avoid responsibility for your own healing. But God is calling you higher than that. He is calling you into ownership. Healing begins when you stop blaming everyone else and start asking yourself hard questions. Why did I stay so long? Why do I keep choosing this? Why does this trigger me so deeply? Why am I afraid to be alone with my thoughts? Those answers